Hello, everybody, and welcome to this GACP webinar. Uh, I'll be introducing Ashish here in a few minutes. Just going to do a few housekeeping things first. Feels weird to be doing something that's not the state of craft. I'm so used to doing that, but it's fun. And thanks for being here, Ashish.
Thank you.
Cool. So I'm just gonna minimize Ashish for a little bit while I do the housekeeping things, and then we'll bring him back in, ask him to introduce himself, and get into the webinar. Um, so, uh, yeah, I live and work on the unceded territories of the Sinaiaks and the Tanaha people, and yeah, as many of you are aware, there's been a pretty gross history in many parts of Canada, including this one here. There's used to be a population of thousands of those First Nations here, and the Sinaiaks especially have really been decimated in this area. There's less than 10 today. There's a lot of gross things that happened in the history in the area here. They were officially deemed to be extinct by the BC government so that they wouldn't have to honor any of the treaties they had in place, and push through a bunch of dams that really destroyed a lot of their agricultural lands in the area here, which of course made things even more challenging. There's a whole slew of things that I'm not going to get into here right now, but wherever you are in Canada, I think the first step to any kind of meaningful reconciliation is to understand the history of the first people who stewarded the land that you're on before it was colonized. So I think it's important to be aware of that history wherever you are. So that's the land acknowledgement that I'll do. I'm not a fan of the typical land acknowledgements. That's just like a check marks of we thank the people who lived here before us. Good, did the thing, pat myself on the back. So like to have a little bit more substance to what we share here with ours. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. A couple other housekeeping things. There is a dedicated questions and chat function in this system that we're using here, Livestorm. You can see those buttons. If your interface looks like mine, if you're on a computer anyway, it'll be on the bottom right of your screen. Those of you on phones, I'm not sure what it looks like there. We love it when you interact with us. We would like you to ask questions as they come up. If there is a question that you like that somebody else has asked, you can upvote it, and we will be sorting questions based off of the most upvoted. I might ask questions in the middle of the webinar if it's really pertinent to what we're talking about, or it might just be saved until the end. It kind of just depends on what's in flow. But the webinar is gonna be a lot more fun if you guys are actually engaging with us and asking us what matters for you. And then if you have commentary on anything, if you just want to say hi, we love that too. And then use the chat for that. But yeah, for questions, please use the dedicated questions section that we have there. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring Ashish back to the forefront here and say hi first to everybody who is in attendance. Thank you all for being here. There's 13 of you so far, and we expect a number more. And hi, Ashish. Welcome to the stage here.
Yeah, thank you, Sammy. Thanks for inviting me. Really glad to be here with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think this is actually your idea, so thank you for inviting me, I should say.
Thanks to both of us.
Let's thank ourselves. Isn't that great? Ashish, can you tell me and our audience a little bit about yourself? I'm curious about who you are, your history in kind of the quality assurance space and in the cannabis space, and then let's focus on that first, and then we'll get into what your company does after that.
Absolutely. I mean, as everyone would know, my name is Ashish, or Ashish Singhal in full. I started my journey with a biotechnology degree. I was very enthusiastic about the science and everything from the beginning since I started my career. And after that, I did a master's in food science. That was my entry into Canada. And after that, since then, I've been in QA and regulatory field, starting with the food industries, agriculture industry. If you believe me, I have tasted canola oil while it's just produced, so it tastes really nice. So that was one of my job in the canola oil tasting industry. It tastes really nice, actually. Um, and and then I moved into cannabis in 20. 2019, I would say, but I started prepping for 2018. Since then, I've been in QA and regulatory field, working in the licensing sector, compliance sector, which is technically licensing, and as a QAP, Health Canada Security Cleared QAP. And lately, I've been working with a lot on the EU GMP and the GACP side of this stuff. So overall, that is my background. I could tell you. Yeah,
What
definitely.
about CanSat Consulting? You started this
Yeah.
company. You work as a QA within the Canadian cannabis market. Tell us a bit about what you guys focus on.
So at Cancer, yes, the Cancer company, that's my baby. I started in 2022, and I just felt that there was a need of the gap uh, in terms of the real pure knowledge and the experience. So that is the reason I started that organization, and it is going well by God's grace. So our intention is to focus on actually on the compliance side of cannabis, which includes licensing, quality assurance. I work with a number of companies as a fractional QAP and provide services in relation to GACP or EU GMP. We also help companies connecting with buyers, not extensively, but that's also a little bit part of our services.
Great. Thanks so much, Ashish. You want to get into the meat of the webinar?
Definitely, please.
Let's do it. Um, so I guess I think the best starting point. This is a GACP webinar. What's GACP? Good agricultural and collection practices. What actually is that?
Yeah. So GACP, I think you've already said the full form, so I won't say that again. So GACP is a requirement. It's a set of requirements which a company has to comply in order to send the product to an EU GMP company. That's in a short and in a very simplistic way. That's what it is. In terms of definition way, what does it mean is that before GMP, the GACP comes, and the GACP in generally involves your cultivation until harvesting. However, there is a drying step that could or could not be GACP. That's something I think we will definitely chat about.
Yeah, we'll
But
get
if
into
you
that
are
later.
yeah, and if you're a cultivator and you're looking to export cannabis, you need a minimum of GACP for the German
So,
markets or and the European markets.
so functionally, if you want to export into the EU, if you want to export into any country that has these GMP standards, you have to be at a higher standard than what GPP requires, which is the Canadian regulatory model. And you kind of have to upgrade your standards from good production practices to this GACP, good agricultural and collection practices. And that then will allow a facility operating in the EU or Australia or somewhere that might want to import your product to actually be able to buy from you because you're now at the standard that they are required in order to,
Yeah,
to bring it to your
yeah.
firm.
Yes, so and then to expand on that, so I will just throw in a little bit GMP. So GACP and GMP goes together generally. That's what the practice is. In this case, you're right. So the GPP standard, when Health Canada started, it started with the highest risk level. Like everyone was worried about GPP. Auditors were very worried about Health Canada. But the auditing process since then has been a little bit easier for companies. While for GACP, the standard is getting closer to EU GMP because they want to make sure that the product you're sending to the GMP companies, it's not just going as a process. It's actually processed at EU GMP companies. So that is the intention generally with the GMP companies. So yes, the standards are a bit higher for than the GPP. Some of the requirements are extra, like risk assessments. In GPP requirements, you're not required to conduct any risk assessments at all. There is also a new requirement of validation. So that is also there in the one of the main or key requirement in the new GACP requirements.
And I'm gonna skip over all this for now, but we will come back
Yeah.
to this. A big chunk of this webinar will focus on diving deep into everything that Ashish just touched on here right now. I want to start off though, kind of at this higher level. So we talked about the what. We kind of touched on the why as well, but I want to dive deeper into that. I mean, the why is to be able to export. Why would somebody care about wanting to export? What does that mean for them, Ashish?
That's a very good question, and I think it goes without saying that we know that the domestic cannabis market is struggling a bit. No matter how good a product you could produce, the supply chain is could be disruptive. the product you could not get maybe more than $2.5 a gram. I mean, I'm not saying no one is getting it, but I have seen some horrible pricing for a very good product in domestic market. So at least what happens on the export level, when you're exporting the product, what does it do is that the medical cannabis market in Germany, UK, they still pay a much better dollar per gram. I mean, you can sell it for much dollar per gram at the retail, shouldn't say retail, at the medical level. Now, when does that happen is then they have the ability to pay the Canadian growers a little bit more, or maybe a significantly more in many cases than the domestic market. At the same time, when you're trying to sell the product in a bulk format to the export market, compared to cannabis products, which is finished package and labeling, you are saving a lot of money in the excise taxes too. So overall, it adds up a lot of advantage. There are some markets, like a UK market. The UK market is a smaller market than German, but they could pay you a higher dollar per gram than the Germany market too, though the market is smaller. And a lot of these actually goes also the negotiation, how you negotiate your contract, the payment terms and everything. It's very hard to say that this client is going to get $3, this is going to get $4. It depends on when you sit down, how confidently you can convince the buyer that your supply chain, that you can consistently supply without quality issues. They are very particular on the quality issues. And that is becoming evident because in the Health Canada audit, when you're buying product in domestically, no one is asking you a detailed batch record. But now I'm seeing a big trend where even the importers, they're asking you a full set of your batch records, and they go in detail why you do not have the temperature, why you do not have the humidity. And I think it is because they want to make sure that when they receive the product, that they can confidently supply to their medical market without being in the case of a recall or any other those situations of mold contamination.
Okay, that makes sense. So buyers really, they're looking for consistency, and consistency with high quality. That's kind of what they're looking for. And I don't necessarily mean high quality from a consumer high quality of like the highest quality craft flower, though I would like to touch on that in a bit. I just mean from a health and safety perspective, high quality.
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
So let's talk about kind of this more craft high quality. Is there appetite for that in the global market?
Absolutely. Canadian weed or Canadian cannabis, as to say, is actually very sought after. Regardless of all the challenges, people are crazy about Canadian cannabis, which is a good thing to be proud of. And to have that cannabis of good quality, I think the buyer is looking for whether, as you said, the two main things, whether this person can provide me consistent supply without a lot of supply chain logistic issue, they are organized, whether they have a compliant QMS system that they don't, and they're trustworthy and reliable. So these are 3 or 4 things they're always looking. If you, and I think I would say the QMS has become a little bit more paramount because they do not, one of the reason or one of the things we always hear is that this product is tested at this microbial level, which was very good in Canada, but when they test on their end, it suddenly has so much of high microbial count. So that is one of the
and I'll just interject here to say that the QMS that Ashish is talking about here, he doesn't necessarily mean a software QMS like Isolocity or something like that, though it could be. He means more in the broader sense of there is a thought out intentional quality management system in terms of your SOPs and how you guys approach quality and evaluate the quality of both your processes and your product. So that's kind of what he's referring to here. And we will touch on this more later on in this webinar. We're going to get into the specifics of how do you go from GPP to GACP. That's going to be part of this conversation here. I think one thing that I'd like to just get you to repeat one more time, because I think it's a really key point you just made. You said there were 4 things that these buyers in export markets are looking for. Could we list them one more time? What are those 4 things they're looking for?
So one of the key thing is your compliant quality management system. That you have a consistent quality management system, as you explained, the SOPs, forms, that you're complying to your SOPs and forms. Your record shows what it says in the SOP. So they're looking for all that. That's first thing. The second thing they're looking is that you can consistently supply product, because they're not looking for usually spot buys. They're looking for consistent supply of product. Um,
Does this put because this feels like it would negatively impact anybody who does outdoor grows where they're like a seasonal thing and it's only once a year that they have product available. Is there any appetite in the European export markets for outdoor cannabis in your experience?
I have I have come across one or two growers who are doing that, and their microbials are great. I do not see. I haven't seen anywhere, but I haven't seen personally seen an outdoor company supplying to the European market. That being said, there's nothing stopping that because when you read the regulations, it's not stopping. It talks about both indoor and outdoor.
Yeah.
So there is an appetite. If you can pass all the requirements and everything, and you prove you have GACP, I don't see how they could stop you. That's definitely a possibility there.
I'm just curious specifically because you said the consistency of being able to constantly deliver and not have it be sporadic. So because by definition, if you're an outdoor grower, you're not like growing every 2 months, every 3 months. Here's a new batch of
Well,
flower.
but yes, when I say consistently, what I mean to say is that if a buyer actually, if you have a supplier who's asking you, let's say, I want to have 500 kg of your product every year, okay? Now, an indoor grower cannot produce that much by capacity, but an outdoor grower might, in their one grow, they might have a much larger farm and they can do all of it at one go. So technically, they might meet the supply requirements. So it really depends. If you have
It
a
depends.
if
It
you have
depends on their need and what they're kind of creating product wise.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
What I meant to say is that what they're not looking is if your contract says that they want 25 kg to 50 kg each month, and you say
Yeah.
that okay,
Okay.
in the third month I cannot supply that's a big no for them.
Okay. But if the contract is like once a year, we're gonna get a 200 kilo supply,
Absolutely.
and you can do that, then
Yeah.
that's fine. As long as okay.
Yeah.
Gary asked a question that's relevant right now. I'm gonna ask as well. So
So
if he's an outdoor grower, does it make a difference if he has an organic certification? Is that something that can be an impact?
that's a very good question, actually. There are very few companies who has actually an organic grower certification in cannabis. It definitely adds an advantage in terms of a negotiation and talking to the buyer. So there is a company called as ProCert who can do that organic certification. And if you have that, that definitely helps you in negotiation. It does not necessarily help you in GACP. GACP and organic are totally different thing. But having an organic, it gives you an buyer advantage. Sorry, seller advantage.
Yeah. Okay. So it's completely irrelevant from the process of being GACP certified, but it gives you a leg up in terms of differentiation and being able to be more attractive to.
Absolutely, and I would say that they should make sure they advertise on that sense too on their labeling. Although they're doing bulk labeling, they may be able to just have a organic certified or something. They should have some sort of a way. Maybe on their documentation, they should say. Maybe on their batch records, they should say organic certified. So this is a way of a little bit advertising their organic certification too.
Great. Okay. So what are the other things? Let's dive into those again. QMS, consistency. What else are the buyers really looking at?
I lost my chain of thought. Just kidding. Let me think. Um, I believe that. So yes, consistency, supplier. I mean, trust and integrity. That's very important. So what does it mean is that you're complying with your contract. And when I say complying with your contract, is sometime in your contract it could say that if you're going to if you're going to get the product from another cultivation company, and it says you cannot, and you end up doing that, there is a way they could figure out because you have a capacity constraint. Like you cannot produce that much, and they understand that. So these are the terms I would say is a good idea to actually talk to your buyer from the beginning, and they usually understand that. There are some limitations on their end why they cannot allow that. So that's why I think the buyer from their trust and integrity is an important part.
And
I would say.
I think you said
Sorry,
as
go.
well the actual certification coming from a reputable
That's yes.
source.
Exactly, and I think that it's a good important point to touch base on. This is not we are calling it a certification, but technically it's not a certification. It's actually a certificate which is in complying to the GACP requirements. So I don't want to make it more detailed or confusing it, but what does it mean is that you have a set of requirements on GACP, you comply, and you are issued a certificate. Now,
So
who
so so
is
let's
issuing?
let's just backtrack a bit. So
Sure.
the GACP standard, who is putting that out there? Where is this coming from?
WHO and EME. So
So the
you
World
have to
Health
have
Organization, and what was the other? What's the other one?
European Medicine Agency, EME.
Okay. So
Okay.
they are putting out a set of standards. They're like, hey, if you want to be able to have this be part of these supply chains in this European market, you have to be able to show that you are doing things at this standard. What they don't do is they don't give you a license to say you are officially at the standard. It's like, no, it just, but you can be audited by them. Like, what's the process of like validating
Yeah.
that?
So this is an interesting thing. As you would understand, the cannabis was not meant to be fit in these regulations. But now that is the reason you do not have a specific certification issued. So there are certification bodies, there are recognized consulting companies. So how does the process work is there is a set of GACP requirements and checklists, which if let's say if I'm the grower and I want to have the GACP certification, the very first step is to contact that organization who can give you that certificate. The second thing is you have
And
to start with.
just to be clear, these organizations that are giving certificates, they are third parties. They are not
Their,
affiliated with the organizations that set these standards. These are,
no.
there's non-governmental organizations and governmental organizations, the World Health Organization and this EU-based organization. They are setting the standards that everybody has to adhere to. But because they don't certify, there's this market that's emerged of third-party businesses whose entire business is to help people understand the standards and prepare all the documentation to showcase that they meet the standards and to change their operations to actually like meet the standards if they don't meet them already. So that's kind of what
Absolutely.
Ashish is talking about when he says these people you reach out to that can give you a certificate. That's what that certificate is that we
Yeah, so
need.
exactly. It's called a third-party certification or third-party body. So there are three kinds of orders. We don't have to go in detail, but exactly as Sami explained. So once you reach out to this third-party agency that this is what I need to have the GACP certificate to be qualified for, they're going to send you a checklist. You have to have that checklist utilized and update your SOPs, forms, facilities according to that checklist. It's like doing an internal audit. Once you are done with that, you have done those modifications, then the next thing is to set the audit date. Once your audit date is set up, your internal QA, if you don't have one or you're doing it by yourself, so then you're going to have that audit done through this third party certification body. And after that, you get audited, you will get your non-conformance report, any observations they have identified. Those non-conformances observations, you have to provide a corrective action response. And once you successfully say or have satisfied the requirements of the certification body, they will issue you a certificate. So that's the whole process. And generally, you have to have an annual certification done to keep maintaining your GACP compliance.
So in other words, I'm going to paraphrase what I understood from here just to like kind of get
Sure.
the steps involved. Step one is you find an organization that does these third-party certificates that you talked about. And importantly, based off what you were saying earlier in terms of what the buyers are looking for, you want to make sure that this third party has an actual good reputation in the space. That's step one.
That
Step
is true.
two, you negotiate whatever you negotiate, figure out a relationship with them, and you'll kind of you'll share with them to some capacity like what it is that you're doing and in a documented manner, and then they will give you a report that's called this non-conformance whatever you said that outlines all the ways that you do not comply with GACP, and then you basically have to address all those things, show them the documentation to what you fixed, and I guess that process kind of repeats. But then the next non-conformance report will be like a lot smaller. It'll be like, okay, well, these three things weren't quite enough. Everything else was good. This is what you have to address in these three changes to meet the requirements. Then you do it one more time, and then you're good. Whatever it is. Is that kind of the process?
Yeah, that
Or
is correct. You nailed it. So basically, that is the process. And I just want to add one thing here is when someone is going to prepare for this audit, don't just prepare for this audit because the same report which you're going to get generated or lower non-conformances, some of your buyers will be requesting the same audit report. So that report or that supporting documents you could have or the system you're going to improve, that will pay in the long way. So you don't have to keep doing the same work You don't have to keep getting qualified by different buyers indefinitely. You can utilize those systems you have built out and keep maintaining that, because they will be going through this. They will be doing the same process the certification body did. They will be auditing. Every buyer is going to audit. They're going to have a TQA, technical quality agreement. They will have those standard documentation on their end.
Okay. So we'll get into some of the technical things you said there, and then but one thing I want to go back to. You said this is an annual thing that you need to
Yeah,
undertake.
it's an annual.
What's the kind of cost somebody would be looking at if they're doing this annually? If you have
The cost, yeah, the cost is very hard to tell you right now because the cost depends on someone's system. The certification itself, like if you're just getting a certification, like a declaration, a GACP declaration, it might cost maybe $6,000 to $7,000. It's not that crazy, but to prepare that, or if you already have the system, that might be an additional cost, depending on what is the state.
is this $6,000 to $7,000 a year you're talking about here?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the numbers in revenue then. Is the increase in revenue substantial enough that becomes a worthwhile expenditure?
Absolutely. And I mean, when I say that, this is just the certification cost. This is not the cost of helping you to build your system if you don't have that capacity. But to add to that revenue part, I mean, even if you can get a 50 cents to $1 gram more than a domestic market, and you're selling, you're producing, your capacity now is 2,400 kg, but no one is doing that. But let's say if your capacity, you're doing 600 kg of dry cannabis a year, minimum. So that's 600 kg into $1. That will be itself what, $600,000 more.
Yeah.
So I mean, I mean, this is not a no-brainer.
Yeah. So even if it's only 50 kgs that you're able to export a year, let's just call it that.
Yeah.
And if it's like $1 more, which is a very reasonable, realistic thing, could be. I would imagine it's actually going to be higher than just $1 a year. Then you're looking at $50,000 just right there. So for a small scale grower that's able to kind of put a deal like that together, that could be a pretty significant impact on their earnings. And
it is a significant impact. And I will just add one thing here is that, and this is a little bit from the business point. Sometimes what I see is that whenever someone gets a new contract, they get so much stuck on the pricing, like which I understand from the business point, that I need to have the highest price in the first. But don't look at that. Look at the consistency. If you have a big buyer who is going to buy consistent product, that relationship is going to pave the way to get more buyers, and that's going to be very helpful for the business, like in the continuity.
So would you say like finding like a small but consistent, like, okay, you only want to buy like 20 kilos a month, but you want to do it consistently, so I can sell, what would that be? 20 times 12, 240 kilos a year through you. My capacity is 500, but you know what? This 20 kilos a month at this price point, that's a little less than what I wanted, but still significantly higher than in Canada. That's you'd say just do that, because then you can have kind of this increased revenue that's consistent, and from that have more breathing room and be able to then expand into whatever other opportunities come later.
Yeah, in most cases, the price per dollar per gram is going to be more than the domestic, in most cases. So if it is the same quality,
you wouldn't go through this process if it wasn't like this is more work ultimately to and more
there is a price
standards you have to be at.
Yeah, there is still a price compression in the European markets. I mean, I wouldn't say that everyone is going to get the highest dollar per gram. There is still a price compression, but what I'm saying is that compared to domestic, is still higher.
Especially once you factor in the lack of excise duty. And like I don't know what the European taxation is like, but I'm familiar with the American one, and there isn't a single state in the US that has higher taxes than Canada. Canada's like way more expensive than pretty much every single state. It's like significantly more expensive than most states, and then somewhat more expensive than others, but there's no state that has higher taxes than Canada.
I want to quickly tell you one thing. Yeah, so just to add one thing, I went to Michigan. In the Michigan, I bought a cannabis for $4 for edibles, and that was 200 milligram of total. I don't know what's the capacity, because every state is different. Now, if I went to New York, I bought the 10 milligram edible. That was $30. So that's the that's the price difference you have in the states.
Yeah.
Within the state. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair. Okay, so I want to shift gears a little bit, and and maybe Brandon, I think the question that you asked is something that makes sense as part of what I'm going to ask here. I want to kind of talk about like who the buyers are. We're talking about exporting, but we haven't really, and we've talked about it being GMP facilities that are buying from you, but who are these buyers actually? Like, would somebody be looking at a facility in Canada that's EU GMP to sell to that then would handle that relationship? Would they be talking to actual importers in Europe? If they're talking to actual importers in Europe, what are those facilities? Are they just processors? Are they handling distribution in Europe as well? Do they have like clinics, pharmacies attached to them? Could you give us a sense of like what the
Yeah.
options are for buyers?
Yeah, so definitely. From the GACP point, there are two options a company can do from if they're just GACP, and to be focused on that part, they could send their product to an EU GMP company. And that EU GMP, because the product has to be processed, because it's a GACP product, it has to be processed. Now you have the option of an EU GMP company in Canada, or you have an EU GMP company which is not in Canada. So obviously there are not so many EU GMP companies in Canada, and and then there are so many other companies in Portugal too. There are companies maybe in the Germany itself, but their intention is most of them you're sending the product directly to an EU GMP processing company because they have to turn the product from GACP to GMP. After that product is turned into GMP, then you're going through the distribution channel. So for a GACP point of view, the product is always going to be bulk packaged and shipped. Now that there are multiple other requirements that depends on your specification sheet and all. I think one of the question is that, and we can touch base on that later. Testing requirements, what kind of packaging they require, whether it has to be compliant to. The reason being because the EU GMP companies who is buying the product from you, or maybe they're just as a intermediary, they also want to make sure that they are compliant because receiving a product from a GACP company, they're also taking a risk, and their certification is very stringent. So that's why that is the reason they do all the qualification on the GACP companies. So in terms of the process, just to simplify, GACP to EU GMP. The EU GMP, whether in Canada or non-Canada, that depends on where you want to send the product to.
I'm just gonna cut you off for a second because I at this point all I want to know is what the options are in terms of buyers. Like what are their stories? What are they typically like? Like what's the difference between like why would you want to sell to a company in Canada that's EU GMP
Because
versus a company in Europe?
yeah,
What's the pros and cons for each?
the pros in the Canadian side is that it's nearer. Like you're not sending the product halfway through the world to Portugal or anywhere and taking a risk there. I mean, you have to imagine the risk is if you send the product to Portugal, they end up testing and it doesn't comply, then you have to get the product back, or you cannot really do much. That's one thing. Like
And I've heard some stories that sometimes the contract you just literally can't get it back because of weird import export laws going the other way. That like if it fails the quality test, it's just it gets destroyed
I mean, the
in that
cost is
location.
going to be significant, correct? The cost is going to be significant to get the product back from Portugal or anywhere else to the Canada. I have never seen a case where someone has returned the product to Canada. It's usually either they just sit there or get destroyed, get processed. There are other ways, and yeah, so that's one thing. What was the other part of the question, Sammy, on this one?
Just what's the pros and cons for each? So that's a pro for Canada, con for
The con is the high
the
cost.
EU.
Yeah.
That's something. If something does go wrong, it's easier to rectify here. There's less risk involved. Um, yeah. Are there any other pros for sticking to an EU GMP company in Canada versus exporting it directly?
I would say that's one of the pro. That's the main pro, I would say. But one of the pro could be in future is that if they end up changing the GACP requirement that you cannot dry cannabis at your GACP facility because technically drying is a processing step. It's not a cultivation. If they end up doing that, then it's all pros for the EU GMP company because you have to find a facility which is closer to you, and you have to send a fresh harvested cannabis. Now this is an assumption if it happens. That's
Yeah.
one of the pro. The
And
core.
we'll talk about that more in a bit because I have the sense that it kind of has happened. It just hasn't been enforced yet. But we'll talk about that and what that actually means
Sure.
in a
I
moment.
just wanted to quickly touch base on the con part which you were asking. So the
Yeah.
con, the con is that just because Canadian market is a bit expensive to build and everything. So the cost of processing at a UGMP could be more than processing in Portugal or any other country where the cost might be less. So if you are paying a processing to an EU GMP $1 a gram, it might be 70 or 60 cents a gram in Portugal or anywhere else. So that is one of the con I could say. I'm not saying it happened. In Canada also we have seen price compression in that sense, but we still see that there is a price difference there.
So if you're selling to an EU GMP certified facility in Canada that their model is exporting, would they give you a better price for your GACP product compared to just whatever other LP that isn't doing exporting, isn't looking for GACP product? Is there better pricing offered in Canada for Canadian growers doing GACP?
Are you talking about the final pricing, like the final price which the you're
I'm
talking
I'm
about
talking I'm talking about, okay, I'm a grower, and I've grown my cannabis. Maybe I've dried it, maybe I haven't. I don't want to like get into that topic right now. But whatever the case is, there's two Canadian companies that want to buy from me. One is they're both LPs. One has GMP certification and their model is export based, and you know that you are selling to them as a GACP producer because they want to export your product. The other
yeah.
facility is just doing whatever. They're just uh, insert thing here. It doesn't really matter, but it's not exporting. Will you get a better price in Canada from that EU GMP
Yes,
company?
yes. But I want to add one caveat here. The answer is not that straightforward here. The question is who is your actual buyer? Is the buyer is the UGMP company or is the buyer in the Germany? So you could have a two-way contract versus three-way contract, depending
Oh, so
who
you
is
could have a contract with a European company where there's into the contract is built in, hey, we have a relationship with this person who can do the drying for us and get it to us. And so that'll be different versus, hey, I am a I don't know, like one of our customers is GMP. What's their names? Agile Labs. They're a concentrate company in Alberta somewhere. So they're EU GMP. I mean, they have their own cultivation, but let's say they wanted to buy GACP from another facility. Um, they would be exclusively exporting it because that's kind of like what they're really primarily focused on. Let's just say what that was the thing. So if they were to reach out, have a relationship directly with a GACP customer, do you think that would be a different price point than if you were talking to a German company that was like, "Hey, please use these guys as the intermediary"?
exactly, exactly. So you got it right. Depend if you have a direct contact with the buyer in Germany and you're utilizing just the UGMP company as a processor in Canada, or anywhere, let's say. If
Yeah.
you have that, but then you have to make sure that as a seller, you are making a contact with the UGMP company. You are taking care of
So
everything.
so it basically becomes uh,
Yeah,
a contract processing contract. The
yeah.
agreement is we are using you for your processing capabilities. You're not getting possession of this in the way that you would if you were buying it out. It's not going to be your inventory in the same sense as if you were buying it from us straight up.
Generally, if this happens, is you have to have two or three-way contracts. Like the selling company is going to have a contract with the UGMP company. The selling company is going to have a contract with the buying company, and maybe the buying company might also have a contract with the EUGMP company because the buying company also have to qualify EUGMP. So it could become a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
So the easier path here would be is just send it to the EUGMP and the EUGMP company could be your buyer directly. That could
Yeah.
be an easier path here.
And so in Canada, let's say let's say we have this EU GMP company here that has their own relationships with exports, and they're just looking for GACP because they want to like
Yeah.
funnel and have consistent supply. My assumption is that they would want to pay a little more because they're getting paid more, they have higher margins, and they want that consistent higher quality. And if they're working with somebody who's doing things at a higher standard, they're doing it at a higher standard because they're expecting more money. I mean, I see the aspect of we would offer more money per gram because that's a requirement and an inevitability for it to be sustainable. But I also see the side of, damn, this Canadian market's been really hard. We want to get as much money as we can out of it. So we're going to offer you a really horrible rate, even though it should be more. And there's been a lot of that kind of, uh, borderline unethical, actual unethical behavior in this market that we're in. So I'm just curious if you have a sense of whether the prices actually increase or whether people try to like take advantage of growers?
I would say, I mean, yes, I have seen that. I wouldn't say I haven't seen that. But I've also seen that because sometimes the seller is holding on the product too long, so they don't get much option then. So they're holding on the product, which I understand because, and I feel that.
So,
Yeah,
if you don't have a relationship with the final buyer in Europe, then you run the risk of this intermediary not
you do.
being great at their business side and the sales
It's
side, and
always
kind of
it's always a good habit, not just in this business, any business, to directly form the relationship with the buyer.
yeah.
So in this case, if it's Germany, Australia, UK, and building those relationships goes a long way, and then you could figure out whether you want to do two-way or three-way.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so let's get into the European side now. Are there different types of buyers that you could be interacting with there? Yeah, like can you give us a sense of like, they're going to be EU GMP, that's a requirement, but are there different business models that can exist that people can be interacting with, or is it pretty much always the same thing? Do you have a sense of that?
I would say there could be only two technically. There could be a distributor or there could be a UGMP processor. The product has to, in my understanding, the product has to go through a distributor in Germany. When I say distributor, like
And
it
and
goes to.
can the distributor be the same as the processor? Can one company hold both licenses, or are they generally two different companies?
Generally, I have seen that those are two different entities. But generally, this is what I have seen. They're two different entities. I have come across one entity who has both, but generally, I have seen two different entities because the distribution network also has to have connection with the pharmacies and everything,
Yeah.
and the clinics. So it could become complicated for them.
Okay. So Brandon, I know I mentioned your question was relevant a long time ago, but it's taken a while to get to this point. Brandon asks, in terms of testing requirements, is there consistency across the European market, or will every country/company have different specifications? I'm going to say that it is consistent because it's an EU GMP standard that all of these countries in the EU, if you're importing into the EU, you have to meet that standard with this medicinal product that is entering your body. And that's kind of what GMP is about. It's about things that humans are consuming that have medicinal value. And cannabis is legalized in the countries that have legalized cannabis as a medicinal product. So that's kind of my sense that it is consistent. Is that true, or am I incorrect in
Yeah.
that?
So yeah, there are two parts. If you're sending you as a GACP, you're going to send the product to EU GMP, and the EU GMP company is going to send the product to the final destination. In that sense, that's it. The final destination is where is the distributor. So in this case, you could have two different kind of testing, but what I meant is it's not like it's going to be significantly different. In a recent case, what I see is that the EU GMP company, who was going to receive the product, they had a little bit less requirement than the product which was shipped to than the actually the final buyer. And the reason is it's not like they're missing significant stuff. For instance, foreign matter, for instance, odor, appearance. These are some of the extra elements which they have to comply on the final end, but maybe not for the EU GMP company.
So it's more, but that's a specific. Hey, we are seeking flower that has this particular terpene profile. We are seeking things that smell in this kind of way, look this kind of way. It's more, that's just more market business requirements, client
Not all of
desires.
it. Not all of it. For instance, the foreign matter requirement. I haven't seen foreign matter requirement always documented in the European testing
Sorry, could you
requirements.
could you explain what foreign method? You might have said it before, but
That's okay.
I've forgotten.
Foreign matter is that if you have any seeds or any sort of foreign matter could be anything, but let's say seeds is one example. So they're going to check your product and see what kind of foreign matter you have, if you have, or whether you have less than 2% or you don't have any foreign matter. So whenever someone asks me about specifications, the one thing you have to ask is you have to ask your buyer or the product where you're sending the product to, ask them the specs. Never rely on the specs by yourself. That's their job to provide you the specification sheet. Once you have that spec sheet, simply test it against the lab
And
where they
so
want
and every single buyer will have a spec sheet. That's like a common
they
thing. If you're
have
like, hey,
to.
can you give me your spec sheet for
Yeah.
your standards, your testing requirements, whatever it is, they'll have that ready to go. They'll send it to you right away.
Yes, you have to ask for it. I mean, they would provide their proactive, but sometimes I see that companies say, well, this is what I tested for one company. The second company, why I can't use the same one? Because you don't want to take the risk. You haven't read your contract maybe. So you have to make sure that you are complying with the spec. Why to take the risk? Just ask them the spec, test it against, and you're good.
And Brandon, I just realized you're part of Agile Extracts. I didn't. I brought your company up without even realizing you guys were in attendance. So hello. Um, and I know Gary's had another question for a while, which is, we've talked mostly about flower here, but hash and concentrates is different, Gary, because it gets into GMP. So now you have to have a GMP. If you're going to process it here and export that into the EU, you have to do that at a GMP standard, which is a different and much more rigorous standard than what we've talked about so far. So that's kind of the requirement there. But I'm just curious, Ashish, in your experience, is there much of a market for importing hash and extracts and things like that, concentrates?
Importing as in Germany,
Yeah,
or
as
the
in exporting to the EU. Yeah, importing from the European perspective. Yeah.
the export market is there. However, I would say that the export market for extracts and edibles is much more in Australia. We have seen the Australian market is where they have been a little bit more receptive on the extracts and the edibles. And I think it also comes with the complications of the regulations. As Sammy you have explained, when you're sending the extracts, it has to go through a EU GMP, and then the process of qualification validation is significant on that part. So that's why maybe one of the reasons that we don't see much of extracts going into Germany at this compared to Australian market. Though Australian market also requires GMP, that is a separate topic.
Yeah. Ashish, we have 10 minutes left in the time that we have set. We have a lot more than 10 minutes of material to get into. Do you have the ability to go past time, or is it a hard cutoff for you?
No, I think I should be able to do it. I'm good, man.
Okay, so in that case, because I was gonna ask, or actually, for everybody who's here, I'd like you to type in the chat what direction. Like Martin, I've seen your question. I'm not ignoring it. I'm just trying to figure out. We could either kind of focus more on the business stuff right now and keep kind of talking about the stuff that we're talking about currently, or we can shift more into like the actual process involved in getting licensed, in getting these steps, in getting accredited, and so on and so forth, and then come back to Martin's question, which I think is a great one, at the end to kind of wrap up the webinar. Do you guys have a preference between continuing down this business dimension that we're in right now versus switching over to the actual certification process? I'd love if somebody or two can chime in and kind of just say what you guys are really interested in hearing about. Because yeah, we want this to be relevant for you guys and your needs and interests. Brandon, thank you for starting to type something. If two more people can just type things and say what they want us to focus on, that would be really helpful. Um, Okay, so one person said current conversation, and Martin already asked this question. So there's two people who want this. So we're going to stick with business for the time being. And then we'll either get into kind of the certification stuff if there is time and people tell us in the chat they're interested in it. But if nobody tells us they're interested in that, then we won't make that part of this conversation and just stick with the business side. So that's my request to you guys. If you want for us to get into the certification stuff, which we were planning to, but just this whole conversation around the business side of it has really taken off in a bigger way, let us know. So Martin, you asked, I am currently GACP accredited since 2024. However, all my flower has been sold in Canada and destined for export. However, my buyer is having issues and can no longer buy my flower. What is the best route to meet good, trustworthy partners / buyers to export my flower directly? So yeah, I guess I'm going to reinterpret this question, Ashish. You in your chat that we were just having were saying about how having access to direct buyers, direct importers in the EU makes a big difference, and how that's just gives you a leg up and just more reliability, and you'll be able to get a better deal that way as well than you would if you were to be interacting with a middleman here in Canada that you have a relationship with. And I think, Martin, what you've just described is exactly the example Ashish brought up. He was talking about how, if you work with somebody here, then you're reliant on them and their ability to execute. And if they fail, then that kind of puts you in a really tough place. Um, so yeah, Ashish, I'm curious. How does somebody like Martin? Are you Secret Gardens, Martin? I feel like you are. Let me see. Where are you? Yeah, Secret Gardens. Yeah. Hi, Martin. Nice to see you here. Um, so Martin is a micro cultivator here in Canada. Creating craft cannabis. Like, how does somebody kind of on that smaller scale? Um, how are they able to actually connect with these buyers internationally?
Yes, and honestly, I know it's a tough situation. Yeah, Martin, you are in. Um, I would, if I would be you and I would be in this position, I would be trying to go to some conferences. Like some, I know it's costly, but there is an ICBC in Berlin where a lot of different companies, German distributors, you will find a number of people and try to build relationship there. That's one option.
Yeah,
Second
that's where
option
my
is,
that's where my mind went to as well. It's like there's nothing that beats actual networking, and
yeah,
unfortunately for us, being in my case on the west coast of Canada, anybody else still in Canada, not necessarily the west coast, uh,
mhm,
you got to go to Europe if you want to meet European buyers. And there's
yeah,
some good conferences there. You mentioned ICBC in Berlin. Spanibus is probably a good conference to meet people.
Cannabis,
There's
Europa. Yeah,
there's another one in Barcelona. I forget what the other one's called, but there's a second one that happens there. That's not Spanibus that I've heard good things about.
okay.
But there's some good conferences there that actually have a lot of life and networking. Okay, you're
Yeah.
going to get into a second thing. What's that second thing?
No, I think that's what I was going to say. I mean, that's pretty much you just have to build relationship and networking. There is no short answer to that. I mean, without going into the detail, I don't know why the contractor canceled or sorry, buyer canceled. Sorry, the second thing is what you could do is you could actually try to work with some of the people who are well known in the industry who are actually providing this as a service. I don't want to say
And when
their
you and when
name,
you
but
say the industry, are you saying like in the European industry, in the
no,
Canadian
no.
industry?
So there are some people who are just acting as brokers. Like they're going to the Germany, Europe
Okay.
frequently. And I mean, I know
And so basically,
few
they'll set
companies,
up the relationship, but then they're going to take a cut of everything
yeah,
because they set
they
up
are going to
the
take
deal.
a cut, but what I want to say is that some of the companies who I have seen they have got bigger contracts. They didn't have that direct contact. They had someone who was doing this for a living. They were going to Germany all the time,
Yeah.
and then that was the stepping entry. That could be one of the way too.
I mean, that's a service that takes time, like building those relationships, taking the time to go to different countries, like halfway across the world, and meet these people, nurture these
Another thing I
relationships,
would
set up
say
the
is,
supply agreements.
sorry to interrupt, but one thing I would say
Yep.
is make a good pitch deck. Okay, so whenever you could also actually try to be proactive, trying to find the companies going to the Germany, what are the distributors, what are the UGMP processing companies. Make a good pitch deck. Explain with a picture of your product, picture of your site, little bit of that pitch deck, send it with a summary, try that. It's not just cold calling, but I have seen that being effective. That helps in actually getting a lead in and building the relationship there. So that could be one of the things you could do. Rather than just sending an email, maybe a pitch deck would be a little bit more beneficial.
And I guess just going back to the what we were talking about in terms of uh, a broker taking a percentage of the deal.
Hmm.
I guess it doesn't really matter at the end of the day if the amount that you receive is still like $1 higher, $2 higher than what you're receiving right now. If even with their cut, you end up with just a price per gram that's like three and a half, $4 compared to now being wherever you're at, that's less than that.
Yeah,
Like
you just have
that,
to make sure that you're reading your contract even with the broker carefully. I mean, some
yeah.
of the contracts could be written in a way that you might be end up paying a lot more than it could be. So just
and
make
and
sure
I
that
and I would and I would go a step further than that. I would say don't sign anything like without a lawyer. Like this is the kind of thing where, there's a lot of people in the cannabis industry, and we see this a lot with Certicraft, where especially in our early days, we worked pretty much exclusively with small scale micros, many of
Mhm.
whom came from the traditional market. Now we work with more than just that kind of market segment, but a lot of people who are on that smaller scale have a very DIY attitude. And we have seen so many of especially our early customers just get completely fucked over by not really understanding what they were signing and then being shit out of luck when they were taken advantage of. So I think with a relationship of this magnitude, where you are working with a different company, especially if they're in a different country, where now like there's an interplay of laws of Germany versus laws of Canada. It's like it's not as straightforward as something just signed here in Canada. Getting a lawyer to just review the contract and flag anything that they see as being worth flagging. Uh, and just because they flag something doesn't mean you necessarily care about it. The lawyer's job is to flag these 10 things and explain to you what you're actually agreeing to. And then you, once you understand it, can make a risk assessment of, these three things I don't really care about. So whatever, I'm not going to bring this up. These three things I do care about, but it's not a deal breaker. These four things, though, those are deal breakers. And then, by understanding what you're actually agreeing to, you can then negotiate from that place and be like, there's no way I'm signing it without those things changing. Like that, I think that is such an important thing that a lot of people probably don't overlook. I know a lot of people don't do and don't overlook,
Mhm.
or do overlook. And I can tell you that once you get into like the bigger LP scale, I don't know, where the cutoff is, 50 employees, 100 employees. There's some level where you get to a certain
Mhm.
size where those LPs do not ever sign anything without having a lawyer look at what they're doing. And it might cost you $1,000 to have a contract like that reviewed, but
Mhm.
if that $1,000 then makes you $30,000 a year moving forward, that's time, that's money well spent. So I would say, all of this GACP stuff we're talking about is an investment of time, money, energy in a variety of different ways. And if you're going to do this, you should commit to it. You shouldn't skimp on it. Like, this is something that could make or break your livelihood. And if you think you're doing one thing and then it turns out you just didn't understand what you're signing, and actually what you're doing is this other thing where you're making the same amount of money as now, but with a bunch more cost on your end, that's not a good place to be. So I would really caution that to everybody. Of this is not one of those things to DIY it. This is a place to really lean in on people who fully understand this world, and contract negotiation is a big one. At Certicraft, we have lawyers review every single contract, even if it's really clear. And I'll explain it when I feel like I understand this. Is just I just want you to review it, and then it's a pretty quick thing. Like, it's maybe like I get a $400 charge for reviewing that contract, but just the peace of mind of knowing that there's nothing we missed. And I will tell you, there have been contracts where I thought I understood it, and they caught a thing that I didn't see. And I'm somebody who really understands the legal world. I'm the compliance expert who reads legal documents all the time on our team, and I still miss things. So if I can miss things, everybody can too. So anyway, that's my little ramble on the importance of that.
Yeah, one thing I want to add here and this quickly. You brought a very good example of reviewing the contract, and even you involve the lawyer, which is a great idea, and you should. Uh, as a owner, you should still read the contract because there could be some commercial terms which your lawyer might
100%.
not get to it. One of the term, for example, is when your product reaches to the supplier, the buyer, how many days the buyer has before they could raise any question to that product, uh, without and that will be cost to you. They could say that it's moldy, it could be anything, and you do not have the control when you're shipping the product. You do not have the control where it is stored on their side. So that time period could be 60 days, 90 days, 10 days. It all dictates in the contract. So look into those kind of factors that how you're protected. So that's where I think it becomes more important also.
And one other thing for those of you who don't have experience with lawyers, there's many different kinds of lawyers. So one really critical piece is to find somebody who actually is experienced with
Mhm.
what the thing is. So you'd want to find a lawyer. Like, if you're talking about this international trade, you have to find a lawyer that has experience in international trade. You can't
Exactly.
just go to oh, my friend is a lawyer who works in, I don't know, like helping small businesses in Canada. Like, that has some relevancy. It's not like a family practice lawyer that has zero relevancy. But even a small business lawyer in Canada, if they've never touched international trade before, there might be like important aspects that they just don't have experience with. So definitely lean on your network as well to find somebody who's got the relevant experience and skill. The ideal situation is somebody who's specifically worked many times in contract law for trade within cannabis. If they're experienced with all three of those things, that's like as good as it gets. I don't know if that's realistic or not. This is not something I've ever needed to do, so I haven't sought that out. But relevancy in terms of expertise makes a big difference in terms of how useful a lawyer's time actually is for a purpose of that sort.
True. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions we have right now? No, all the questions have been answered. Um, okay, so we've kind of touched on this. I don't know if there's more to say about it, but we had this point we're going to get into about how to communicate with export partners. You talked about, with the networking sense of sending pitch decks. Sending is more than just like I would suggest, if you have good sales, good reviews in Canada, things like that could be helpful. If you have actual customers that have left reviews for you, like that kind of stuff can be helpful. Is there anything else that you would suggest in your approach? And I'm not talking about the networking. Let's say you've actually connected with somebody somehow through either a broker or through just you went to ICBC in Berlin, whatever it is. You've connected with somebody. How do you? What's yeah? What should the communication look like? What's helpful? What's useful? What's important in terms of communication to build a relationship? Like they're interested now. You've got them interested. How do you develop the relationship? Is there anything that you would highlight as being really important?
I would say just be yourself. My experience dealing with Germans says that you have to have a fine balance between professional and casual. So you cannot be too professional, like in a suit and everything, and you go. I haven't seen them that way, and you can be too casual too. So whenever you are interacting, my interaction with them is be casual, be trustworthy. I mean, in my experience, they're easy to work with people. They're very hardworking people in Germany or UK and everyone. They're very focused. So if it reflects in your work, it reflects in your pitch deck, or it reflects in your communication, I think they will appreciate that. One another thing you could offer that is you could be proactive in providing your certifications. You could be proactive as a part of your that this is what I have. I'm attaching it here, and you could also say that we have been audited by them, and we have only got this observations. We are more than happy to invite you for a tour. You could ask these kind of questions when you're coming here. We want to give you the facility tour, because many of these companies in Germany who are trying to build relation, they travel to Canada and they travel multiple sites. So if proactively you reaches out to them, maybe you could be in their hit list to tour you in the next time. So, and like any other business, keep following up. I mean, that's important, like follow up with them. But what I found so far, like if you're following up and you're writing, they respond. So if you can figure out some of these, utilize your LinkedIn network. LinkedIn is a very great resource to find the distributors or the UGMP companies, and trying to make a connection there.
Cool. One thing I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to share a graph that
Yeah.
Ashish prepared. Just give me a second to go find the file. Here it is. So this is kind of just to give you a sense of how the GACP export market has grown in Canada over time. So, you can see entering 2025, it's exceeded the 20,000 kilos exported each year. So, this is a combination of Canada's market becoming more mature and having, higher quality, more consistent product available, but also more countries globally coming online. Germany coming online, Portugal, Ireland, the UK, Australia. There's a lot of different places in the world that have been ramping up their own internal capacity and supply chain to be able to receive more goods. So yeah, just wanted to kind of highlight that this is we are still in the early days of global cannabis, of it being a legal thing. Like the number of countries around the world that have some kind of legal form of cannabis, I would guess is still in the less than 10% would be my guess of global countries. And those that do have it, most of them, it's like pretty limited medical markets that are intentionally kept quite small, and like to get a medical license in Australia is not easy. To get a license in the UK is very difficult. Like the wait list is massive. And that's kind of true of a lot of like France had like a little test run for a while and they shut it down. There's no more medical program there. I don't know if that's changed in the past like half year or so, but like that's kind of the typical thing. So we are early days, relatively speaking, which means as the stigma drops around cannabis, this is going to keep growing and growing and growing. So I think just from a pure business sense, if you are able to, in the near term or longer term, align yourself into this GACP world, um, and develop these relationships with importers in other parts of the world where the the price per gram for their consumers, their end consumers, is significantly higher than here, then you're kind of setting yourself up to, as the global market grows, to be able to grow your revenue with them. And seeing how horrible the Canadian government has been around actually listening to the challenges of people who are struggling from this completely ridiculous taxation structure that we have here, that goes actually completely against the ethos of the taxation structure. The original excise duty framework explicitly said, we don't want to have this situation where the 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 taxation per gram is very substantial, and so we're doing it this way. But there was this assumption that the price was going to increase, not decrease, and so it's kind of ironic that kind of there's this like specific call out in the excise framework saying, "Hey, we're avoiding this situation," and then lo and behold, we're in that very situation. I don't want to go into that side thought though, but practically speaking, it's been uh, close to half a decade at this point of people like being gouged by the combination of um, what's it called? The cuts that provincial distribution boards are taking with the excise duty framework. And at least the previous Minister of Finance in Canada said that she was not going to consider touching and changing the cannabis framework at all. I don't know if that rhetoric has changed at all, but the government's shown that we can't rely on them to make things reasonable. We're not even talking about a place where people could thrive, just reasonable taxation. So who knows how much longer that'll take? Like, I sincerely thought 3 or 4 years ago it would be like a year or two until we had meaningful change. But here we are 4 years later, and there still hasn't been any meaningful change. So perhaps it's going to be another 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. Who knows? So I feel like, with that understanding, being able to tap into this rapidly growing global market can only set yourself up for more reliable future in the long run. So that's kind of my like business entrepreneur hat on, just looking at this graph of what exports have looked like in Canada, knowing that there's such a tiny percentage. I think it's only 3 countries right now that have legalized recreational cannabis to any capacity. That's going to keep changing. It's like the U.S. just legalized CBD products, I think, in the past few weeks. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong, but I feel like I read that somewhere. So like there is shifts that are happening that are allowing more exports, and that will grow and grow and grow over time. And so if you are in a place where you can ride that wave because you have the certifications in place, I think you're setting yourself up for success. Do you have anything to add to that, Ashish? I know I've rambled for a while on this.
No, I think you touched base quite a bit on everything. No, I would say that the, having a certification of this sort definitely opens up the avenue, and the reason being is we didn't go in very deep, but the new regulations or new changes to the GACP, which has come in place in this year, they talk about, and we didn't go in detail, but they talk about certain elements which I never thought will be in the GACP, like validations. So without going into detail, but when you have to implement some of these requirements, so you have to comply, you have to start thinking from the beginning. Like you cannot just simply have it and start on the next day. So because having something like validation, it opens up your mind. You have to understand the process, how to create the templates, how to implement it. So it's never too late to start, but at some point, export markets will also could get saturated if the legalized pathways doesn't open in a very faster way. So yeah, I mean that's all I just wanted to add up. Yeah, from my end.
Cool. I'm kind of feeling like the end of my capacity and energy. So I'll just briefly touch on kind of the stuff that Ashish just alluded to, those changes and kind of what's involved in getting licensed. I'm just going to share a summary from the conversations that me and Ashish have had. Ashish, you can add anything to it if you feel like there's anything else that should
Sure.
be added to it. Um, but yeah, essentially this year, there were changes to GACP that made it harder. They made it a lot more involved, a lot more work to actually get and maintain a certification in that world. There were things that previously were a gray area, that were ambiguous, specifically around drying, harvesting and drying and trimming. Is that GMP? Is that GACP? It wasn't really clear. The language that has changed now in the GACP format makes it clear that only the collection harvesting is GACP and everything that comes next now is GMP. People aren't enforcing it yet. It will at some point likely be enforced. Who knows when? So that's kind of a shift now, that if you want to dry and trim your own product, you now have to have a GMP license to do it if you want to be exporting. If you're going to follow the letter of the law, I mean it's not law, the letter of the standards exactly, then that would be a requirement. Um, so that kind of like adds, maybe that's a new pro now for selling to an EU GMP facility in Canada, because to sell your fresh product, ship it around the world, there's just more chance that like mold will develop or something will go wrong if you aren't able to actually properly dry it first. Um, so that's kind of one change. In terms of the actual process, like he mentioned, he being Ashish mentioned validation. Validation is a big part of the GMP world, and it was not previously required for GACP, but now it is. And validation essentially means that for every single thing that you do in your facility, you are intentional with it, very intentional with it, and it's documented. So Ashish, can you remind me, there were four different kinds of qualifications. Can you remind me what those are?
Yeah, so that's equipment qualifications. All the equipments, critical equipment or major equipment, you have to have a cycle: DQ, IQ, OQ, PQ. So
Yeah,
design
those
qualification,
are the, yeah, design
the
qualification, install
installation,
qualification, operational qualification, performance
performance.
qualification. Yeah, those are the four things. Yeah, and so each of those things, it's like it basically gets into different stages of your entire process. So you brought up the example of a scale earlier in our conversations that we were having. Design qualification for a scale. What's the specification of the scale? Is it does it actually have the range we need? Does it have the like the what's it called, like the increments that we need? Is it, if it's going in 10-gram increments, that's not specific enough. If it only goes to 200 grams when we need to weigh up to 5 kilos, that's not good enough, like, so those kinds of things. IQ is install qualification. Can you tell us about that? What does the install qualification involve?
Install qualification, if taking an example of a scale, is so if you have a manual, the manual could say that do not put your scale on an unlevel surface. Okay, it could say that, obviously, and it goes without saying. The second is do not put in direct flow of the air. Okay, because that could impact your readability. So installation qualification is saying that you are installing as per the manufacturer recommendation, and you're proving it through the documentation.
And then OQ is operational qualification. Is that kind of, you have the 200-gram calibration weights and you're putting it on there to make sure it actually shows 200 grams, and what's involved in that?
Operational qualification, in a simple term, is whether your equipment is operating at their minimum and maximum capacity. So if there is an operating range on the scale, you have to check whether it's going in the min, it's going in the mid, it's going in the max, and you can prove it that it's working as per their operational acceptance criteria in a simpler term.
And then performance qualification is once you're actually operational in real life, that it's performing how it's supposed to and designed to, and you're documenting that in
Exactly.
some.
It's functioning as intended for your requirements. That's in that sense. So exactly. You nailed it.
So we just gave very basic examples for a scale. It's actually gonna be a lot more involved for each of the design qualification, install qualification, operational qualification, and performance qualification. There's gonna be a lot more for that scale, and all of this needs to be documented. And what we just talked about here at that higher level has to happen for every single process, every single equipment, every single thing that you use within your facility in order to be able to be GACP validated. Before there is this thing GMP validated, like Certicraft is GMP validated software because we've done this kind of thing for our software, and that's kind of the GMP standard. And any facility that's getting GMP certified, if they're using Certicraft as a vendor, well, great, you have to prove that it meets these operational performance qualifications and whatnot. And so we've kind of created validation for our software. We provide our customers with this massive documentation that shows all of the ways in which our software is validated for their needs. They then have to do their own performance qualification to kind of show that within the context of their facility, it meets their needs. But we make it very simple because we've done all the legwork on our end,
Yeah.
and that's just like one part of the puzzle. It's the software that they're using, and so that's kind of something to keep in mind, that if you do go down this route with the changes that were announced earlier this year, there's a lot of steps and documentation that you have to take and do in order to show that you are at this standard. So that's kind of an unfortunate change for cultivators here, because it used to be a lot easier, and now it's not that easy anymore. There's a much more involved. But yeah, just wanted to give you briefly a sense of that. We had a lot more we wanted to kind of get into in that department, but we talked a lot more about the business side. So I think that'll be it for me, at least. Ashish, is there anything else you want to add on kind of the certification side of things that you think is relevant?
I would just add one last thing. You would also require risk assessments to be done. Risk assessments of your process. Generally, it will cover under process validation with the new requirements. But even though if the process validation doesn't come into enforce, at least the risk assessment is still required for the current certification requirements. So, for instance, if you're going from the starting material to cultivation, in the cultivation you have propagation, vegetative flowering. So you're taking each stage, you're assessing the risk, and you're writing your risk mitigation measures. For instance, what SOP controls that risk? What measures you are taking so that risk is not going very high? So that risk assessment is still required and is relevant.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's what.
Well, thank you guys all for being here. Appreciate your time. Ashish, do you want to put in a plug for your company? Say one more time what you guys do in case somebody here is interested in you guys.
Definitely. So our company is CanCert Consulting, and we can share the link later too. We do compliance, quality management, licensing with respect to cannabis. If you're looking for EU GMP help, like if you're looking to get into EU GMP side, we will help with that on the certification side, and also on the GACP certification, we help with the companies to prepare for so that they can pass their GACP certification, and also QAP requirements. If you're looking for a QAP, we do the QAP services also, in a nutshell.
So you don't actually do the certification, but you help people prepare for it, so that process is like a lot more cost effective, and there's less steps that they need.
We haven't. We are considering that. Let's say we are considering that of issuing certificates, but we haven't been there yet. So, but we have. Yes, we are not there yet to issue the certificate.
I guess you would run into that problem that you're talking about of reputation, and you guys are currently non-existent in that realm. So if somebody gets a certification from you, then none of the European companies would know who you are. How do you plan to get around that? I'm curious. Have you given that much thought?
That's a business idea. As I said, we haven't given a thought, and that is something we are considering. I think it also not just the level of recognition, as in, I mean, we do have a very good presence in online and also our work.
Yeah,
So
the people who've worked with you, who I know, have had nothing but good things to say about you guys. So
yeah, so I think what the companies also look for when they're looking for a certificate is whether the companies who are going to certificate you their audit reports. So our audit reports right now, if we do end up writing, they're very comprehensive. So we're not just going into the site and saying yes, no, yes, no. We evaluate on all the checklists. So that's our intention to prove that, okay, our certificate, if it is going to be, it's relevant enough. But at this point of time, we are not issuing certificates. To be clear, we are preparing the companies to get their certificate.
Cool. So yeah, if any of you guys are listening to this and thinking you're curious about GACP and you want to get a better sense of what the steps might actually be on a practical level for your operation, reach out to Ashish and Kansat, and they might be able to help you with that. Maria, Martin, Brandon, thank you for your kind words there in the chat. And yeah, you guys will get an automated email after this thing wraps up that has just brief information about Certicraft, about CanSat. I guess for those of you listening who aren't familiar with Certicraft, we are compliance software um, for people who are licensed to grow, process all the things in Canada. We have a few customers in Australia now too, which was kind of a surprise. Little people reached out to us wanting to use our software. We never marketed there at all, and we. We are built to GMP standards and with all the validation that happens there, which means we're also at a GACP standard because it's the same validations are required. So if you use our software with the validations now, you would need something that's actually validatable for GACP or GMP if you were to be using software. So we are at that standard for anybody interested. And there is a chance that that you guys might get an email next week with kind of a presentation recap that that will come through, but maybe not. We'll see whether or not that happens. Cool, guys. Thanks for being here. Appreciate all of your time. Ashish, thank you for being here. Appreciate your
Thank you.
expertise and knowledge. And wish you all a very lovely rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.